Ousted Syrian leader Bashar Assad says he had no plans to leave the country after the fall of Damascus a week ago, but the Russian military evacuated him after their base in western Syria came under attack. Now the comments are the first by Assad since he was overthrown by insurgent groups. Assad said in a statement on his Facebook page that he left Damascus on the morning of December 8, hours after insurgents stormed the capital. He said he left in coordination with Russian allies to the Russian base in the coastal province of Latakia, where he planned to keep fighting. He stated that after the Russian base came under attack by drones, the Russians decided to move him on the night of December 8 to Russia. Well, for his assessment, I'm joined now online from London by the European Affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Glad to have you join me on Arise News Hour this minute or moment.
Yes, thank you very much.
Good, fantastic. I'll get to the fact that in a bit that Assad just made some comments after his ouster. But let's look at what the President of the United States, Joe Biden, said. He praised the regime change by a coalition of rebels, calling it a moment of historic opportunity. What's your sense of Biden's reaction and the fact that, like it is said, too many cooks spoil the broth?
I'm afraid it's too early to say immediately what the results will be in the medium term. Even the short term is hard to forecast. What we can say is the regime has fallen and there's no possibility of Assad returning. But quite who will take power and when and what the exact outcome for Syria will be is yet to be made clear. The problem is there is no clear group which has a clear plan. Instead, what we have is a number of people who have different sort of ideas, but ideas aren't enough. Really, what often happens in these matters is that sooner or later a group seizes power which is very determined. And unfortunately, as things stand, because there is no clear timetable to democracy, that may well yet happen.
So, too many cooks in the mix. I mean, you have many of the rebel groups. He said that Hayat al-Sham, which Mohammed al-Jolani belongs to, is linked up with al-Qaeda. In fact, the UN and the US designates Mohammed al-Jolani and the group as a terrorist organization. Now, on two fronts, what does this hold for the people of Syria on the one hand? Is it a question of from frying pan to fire? Assad gone, now you have too many groups, too many cooks spoiling the broth. And on the other hand, for America and countries like Turkey, is it a question of when the preferable is not available, then the available becomes preferable? I mean, having tagged Mohammed al-Jolani and Sham as a terrorist organization.
Well, you're quite right to point out here there is a dichotomy, is there not? That this terrorist group is in theory anti-Western and yet suddenly is saying that it's overthrown Assad, which means there's going to be very good news for everybody, including the West. I would argue it's too early to see what will happen. And moreover, it's by no means clear this group will retain power. There is no timetable. Stress, there is no plan. Nothing has been said more than Assad has gone. That is not actually a way of running a country. And the problem here is that if there is a vacuum, and it does appear there is one, sooner or later someone will come in who can fill the vacuum, which is the point I was making earlier, namely that because they are not clear in their goals, apart from overthrowing Assad, they now stand as a potential problem, which means that other people may well seize power from them, or they themselves become what they were, namely a more Muslim, anti-Western group, which is what they were before, of course.
Isn't that the problem, really? Let's now turn to the fact that Assad has spoken since his overthrow, saying the Russians evacuated him. It was not his plan. His plan originally, he says, was to fight on, but when the base of the Russians were attacked by the rebel forces, Russians had to evacuate him on the night of December 8th. But with Russians, Hezbollah, Iran on one side, supporting Assad, who is now in Russia, and then US, Turkey, and some other allies on this other side. What's the fate of Syrians now Assad is out of the picture? Now, you talked a little about the fact that we've talked about too many rebel groups, but what's the fate really of Syrians in the center? It's true they celebrated the overthrow of Assad, but what's their fate? What do you think going forward? How's it going to look like?
Well, I can point out, first of all, Assad, whatever he says and doesn't is irrelevant. We can forget about him. The real problem is the one you've mentioned. And I repeat, more often than not, these sort of revolutions end up with yet another dictatorship, unfortunately. What we're looking now is a period of sort of semi-anarchy, in the sense there's no clear purpose or plan or timetable or anything. And in those situations, history teaches that sooner or later someone takes power and that therefore will be another dictatorship. It is essential, if this group really wants to change Syria, that they act decisively. And just merely overthrowing Assad is, I'm afraid, only half the story. They have to do something positive now, and that just isn't happening. And so therefore it's more likely than not that there'll be country will plunge into turmoil until another dictator emerges. Please remember, the reason why dictators emerge in the first place is because the alternative is anarchy and endless civil war.
Yeah, Marek, good. Your claim, what you're saying, but wouldn't it be too optimistic to think that this just happened on December 8th? Today is December 16th, I guess, so I hope I'm correct. Would it be being too optimistic to think that within a space of 8 days that these rebel organizations will come together and start really formulating a plan? So I'd ask you, what will this, if you like, supporting forces, what role do you expect them to play in maybe harmonizing things and seeing that a plan is worked out? I want you to add to that the fact that there is the question of orderly transfer of power. We've been talking about it. Jolani has met with the PM, Jalali.
But here again, what you have is no clear vision, no clear plan. And therefore, in this situation, there's more likely to become competing groups, competing groups for power. The plan he has met is quite true, the PM, but all this is now, it's quite clear, liable to change. Therefore, Syria as such, unless it produces a decisive plan soon, and this is by no means evident, because it's quite clear the rebel group, when it took power, had only the plan of overthrowing Assad, and so there is no plan. And in these circumstances, it will, unfortunately, more likely than not, collapse. So what you're saying is, we hope, and I agree with you, that they work something out, but so far, nothing has been worked out, and quite clearly nothing before was worked out either. And so therefore, unless they get their act together quickly, somebody else, some other groups, will seize the opportunity to take power and to bring order back.
Yeah, because nature abhors a vacuum. What you're saying, if I'm hearing you, is that they should have been thinking about what to do in the absence of Assad, but it looks like they were just thinking about, let's get down with Assad, and nothing was thought about putting a structure on the ground for the Syrian people. But Israel is being accused of taking the opportunity to land grab. What's your sense of Israel's attacks on Syria's military bases?
Well, the problem here is that Israel has, as you rightly say, taken the opportunity to neutralize Syria, at least for some time. And also there is the element of a land grab about it, because they're talking about putting more settlers on the Golan Heights and have in fact moved soldiers into the neutral area. The problem here is precisely the same, but now, as we said before, internally, but externally too. You see, if you say you take Assad out of the equation, there's no dictator. The problem is that one of your neighbors, in this case Israel, can take the opportunity to, if you like, put it sort of crudely, but in a way everyone would understand, walk all over you. And this is, of course, the very reason why in these countries there emerge dictators, there emerge these groups, because the moment they fall, so in this case Assad, things happen which are definitely not what the country wanted. As things stand, the rebel group has said they're not going to do anything about Israel because the country is war weary. But all that means is that somebody else who is full of rhetoric will then have some support and probably may take power. It's most unfortunate, some of these Israeli tactics, because they simply serve to show up that the fall of Assad is not, alas, an unmitigated good in every respect for the Syrian people.
The situation sounds very fluid, and one things for the Syrian people and what will be of the Syrian nation going forward. Thank you so much. European Affairs analyst, as we're speaking to Arise News from London, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Thank you for your time.